You know, I really couldn't say when I first saw the lines. I mean, sure, I know it was sometime around my tween years when I saw them for sure. I was 13 when I saw the brightly coloured lines cutting straight across the gravel parking lot, leading me back to my parents after I had gotten lost on that road trip. But before that, I really couldn't say. Maybe I'd seen them before, mistaking them for pavement lines and supermarket markings. Regardless, after I noticed them, I couldn't help it. I saw them everywhere. 2 lines, red and green, etched into the ground like they were marked in paint. No one else could see them. I'd commented on them once, to my mother, and she looked at me like I was crazy. I was old enough at that point to know to keep my mouth shut. But I watched as they wove their way in and out of my life. And, as one does, I inevitably found myself overwhelmed with the need to investigate them, to see where they led. The curiosity was more than I could take. The memory of that first time was too fresh in my mind, of the green line leading me straight back to safety. And so, when I was 14, I grabbed a bottle of water and a snack, and I followed them. The green line, of course. Green is good, and red is bad, right? It just seemed smarter that way. It had taken me on a winding, twisting path, deeper and deeper into the city, until at last I found myself at a robotics tournament being held that afternoon. It was thrilling. I had no idea that something like that was even a thing, but my interest was piqued. I decided I wanted to do something like that with my life, and I looked at that little green line with newfound respect. So I followed it again. Over and over I followed it, and time after time my life was rewarded for it. It took me to the front door of a prep school where I met Mr. Graves, whose tutoring I hold directly responsible for getting me into college a few years down the road. It led me out of danger as a kitchen fire burned out of control in my school, and it crossed my path with that of the woman of my dreams. Literally. We smacked into each other on a crosswalk. So, here I was. I was 30 and the world was at my fingertips. I sat in my leather gaming chair in front of the desk holding all of my equipment. I looked out of the window of my top floor penthouse, gazing down at the city below. The walls were covered with awards I had won, in automation and robotics and system design. My lovely, smart, beautiful wife was in the other room, reading a book as she brewed coffee. It was perfect. Really perfect. All thanks to that little green line. But I couldn't help it. I was bored. My whole adult life, I'd relied on that invisible line to guide my steps. It hadn't bothered me when I was younger. I was just a kid, and this line opened doors for me I didn't even know existed. I'd followed it without hesitation, trusting it to take my life where it needed to go. Now that I was older, now that I had time to stop and think about it, I wondered if this had all really been for the best. Had I just taken the easy path? Had I gone with the flow and given up on taking my life into my own hands? It kept me up at night, I'll be honest. And through it all, it burned in the corner of my vision. That red line. It seared into my sight like it was on fire. It demanded attention, begging for me to give it the shot I'd only ever given its green brother. That old curiosity was back. And so I grabbed an old messenger bag out of the closet, a remnant of my college days. I threw in bottles of water and a pocket knife, a charge cable for my phone, and a granola bar. I laughed to myself as I saw it. It looked so much like the bag I had packed all those years ago, when I first walked the green line. But that felt right, you know? I slipped out the door with a quick goodbye to my wife. She accepted my excuses of taking a walk without hesitation, pressing a kiss to my cheek and wishing me a good day. I smiled to myself as I left the house. She was the best thing that the green line had ever gotten me. And then I stepped onto the red line. Once again, it led me into the city, But where the green line had taken me straight towards the centre of activity, leading me towards schools and conference centres, the red line seemed to be taking me right to the worst parts of town. I flinched away from seedy glares, eyeing my bag and the make of my coat as I hurried onwards. I hoped this wasn't going to be the last mistake I ever made. The buildings around me loomed higher, the roads and streets giving way to narrow alleys. I was about to give up, to declare this a fool's errand and turn back. And then I heard her crying. "Please, please, no, I swear I won't say anything. I don't have any money. I don't have anything. Please, just let me go. I swear I won't ever."
"Shut it!"
The woman's voice was high, reedy with fear, and her tears threatened to overwhelm her words entirely. It stopped me in my tracks, before I even had a chance to hear him speak. The voices were coming from ahead. The red line burned, inviting me onwards. Almost against my will, I found my feet moving fast, and then I saw her, huddled on the ground in a mass of scarf and hair. A man was in front of her, kneeling, with her purse torn open in front of him. He dug through it, tossing receipts and makeup cases aside carelessly as he looked for anything valuable. In his other hand, he held a gun. It pointed at her lazily, weaving back and forth as he eviscerated the bag. They were right there, no more than 20 feet in front of me. Neither of them saw me. The man's back was to me, and the woman was in no state to notice. My hand plunged into the bag slung over my shoulder, latching reflectively around the familiar shape of my knife. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but having it in my hand made me feel a little better. I needed to call the cops. This was all wrong. There was no way I could do anything to help her. I was just going to end up getting her killed or myself, or both of us. He had a gun. What could I possibly do against... His hand swayed, the barrel pointing back at her. His finger tensed on the trigger. Before I had time to think, I was running. The knife was out of the bag now, gleaming in my hand as I thrust it towards him, towards his neck. If I could knock him over, if I could get that gun pointed away from her. I swore colourfully as I stumbled. The man grunted in surprise and pain as my knife dug into his wrist. I winced, even as I ran headlong into him. Turns out my aim with a knife sucked. But it got the job done. He fell, cursing and screaming, as blood flowed from his wrist. The gun clattered to the cold pavement, forgotten as he stumbled back. His eyes were locked onto my knife. Through the mist of pain I could see in his expression.
"What the hell?"
Clutching his wrist.
"Dude, get out of here!"
I swiped the knife at him clumsily, more threatening than actually intending to hit him. He swore one last time, jumping back.
"Screw this! Keep your crappy purse, lady!"
With one last parting jab, he spun on his heel and vanished rapidly down the alleys. The woman was a mess, eyes all red and sniffling desperately. But she pulled herself together as I approached her, beginning to tuck her belongings back into her bag. Are you okay, ma'am?" I asked tentatively, my voice low. She glanced up at me, smiling. I am now. That horrible... I was so scared. Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you... Don't worry about it. I'm glad I was here. We should get you to the police. I cut her off before she could go on. I knew the signs of an incoming meltdown and figured I needed to get her somewhere safe before her emotions finally caught up with the shock. She nodded, accepted my offered hand with a grateful nod, and we stumbled onwards down the alley. I glanced onwards. The red line glowed brightly ahead of us. My stomach roiled. More? The noise of the city was returning to normal around us as we returned to some semblance of civilization. I began to relax, just a hair, and then, as we turned towards the main street, I hesitated. The red line was turning down a different alley. It led half a block down, and then cut straight up the front door of a little shack. I could see a tiny, hazy tendril of smoke rolling out from under the side door. The line burned, screaming red in its urgency. It seared a line into my vision as I looked down the alley. I paused, caught deep in thoughts. Questions that had been lingering in my head for years, and answers that had suddenly become apparent. The green line took me where I needed to go. It showed me the easy path, the path that I needed to take. What if the red line showed me the hard path? Not the path that I needed, but the path that other people needed me to take. What if it took me to where other people needed me to go? "Can you manage from here?" I heard my voice say, ringing distant in my own ears. The woman glanced back to me, smiling faintly. "I think so. Do you have to go?" I think I do. Yeah." I didn't look back at her. My eyes were still locked onto that building. The smoke was growing, swelling by the second. I half turned, releasing the woman's hand and giving her a reassuring smile. She returned it shyly, waving as she merged back into the flow of pedestrians and made for the police station. I turned back to the red line, and then I broke into a run.